Every time I give this text, there is someone who says, I would never send that. That is like so rude to somebody. I wouldn't want to tell someone I like that they're annoying or it's annoying me. Well, we're back with another Love Life episode with me, Matthew Hussey, Stephen Hussey, and Audrey Hussey.
Hello, friends.
Hello, everyone.
We're excited to be back. We've got a great episode lined up. We're going to be talking about why people pull away after great dates. Why is it you can go on a date, it feels like it went well, all the signs pointed to the two of you having a good time, and then nothing. Complete anticlimax. So we're going to talk about some of the reasons why that happens. We have a poll that we put out on Instagram that we're going to be talking about in relation to this subject. We're going to be reading some lovely Love Life listener comments that have come in. And we've been really enjoying the fact that more of you are emailing us, podcast@matthewhussey.com. More of you are leaving comments under our Spotify episodes, on YouTube. It's lovely. So thank you so much. We have a Love Life line question from one of our dear listeners, Paula. A brand new segment of Steve's Sleeves.
I'll roll them up right now.
Fully bought into Steve's Sleeves now is Stephen. And of course, if you are one of our Love Life members, we have all sorts of wonderful things coming up, including coach check-ins with Audrey. You're going to be working with all of our Love Life members on May the 2nd. I am going to be doing a live session with everyone, answering questions, bringing on live callers on May the 9th. Stephen is May the 16th. And then we have Audrey again on the 28th of the month. Of course, all of the programs, courses for every stage of dating, attraction, confidence building, heartbreak are all inside the Love Life membership. So do check that out. If you're not a member already, go to joinlovelife.com to become a member today. It is the only place where we are as a team live coaching people every single month.
Matthew.
Yes, Stephen.
Before we begin, just a quick question. I am speaking to someone right now. It's going great. I just wondered if you could give me 3 kinds of text that will keep the attraction going.
That's amazing. I would say the first kind of text.
If you can just give me bullet points, that's fine.
I'm sorry?
Just bullets.
Okay. Text 1, the callback. When you remember something from...
So, can you just make it shorter?
Okay. When you remember something from the date...
You know what? In fact, just send me an exact script of the text to my phone.
Stephen, I'm not Matthew AI.
Oh, this is awkward. I'm sorry. You look a lot like him.
Yeah. Well, I sound like him. He talks like me. He has my accent. It has all of my content from the last 20 years.
Sorry, I'm just used to him being so helpful. He'll just answer any dating question I have anytime and no waffle.
And he's super affordable, which is great.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So have you been having lots of conversations with Matthew AI?
I just find him very simple.
So what you're saying is with Matthew AI, you can hear me talk about all of the things that you're interested in with none of the things you're
Sorry, could you just make it shorter?
Okay, well, this is as short as I can make it. If you or anyone else want to try Matthew AI, you can go to askmh.com and try it out for free. You can ask any question you want about texting, about dating, about confidence.
Definitely you should make that shorter.
About breakups, you name it, whatever is the biggest question on your mind right now, you can ask Matthew AI, which, if Stephen's anything to go by, is increasingly preferable to me.
Go check him out. He's lovely.
askmh.com. So we had a comment from Janet on the Flirting episode we did recently, who said, saying the word hot from a man 60 years old and older gives me pause. It sounds very juvenile to me, not a word grown men should use. The sexual connotation is giving the wrong vibe, in my opinion. It's a turn-off to me. I am curious about this because I think when we give ideas of things to say, the psychology behind it is the most important part, undoubtedly. But I always want to challenge people when they say, I would never use that word, or I wouldn't like it if that word was used with me, because words give different flavors to things. So if you say someone looks beautiful, that's very different to you look hot right now.
Yeah, or you look sexy tonight.
That was really sexy. I'm curious, Janet, if sexy is a word that works for you. Because I would argue that we do have to have words that distinguish from the kind of elegant, you look so attractive or you look so beautiful, and the very sexually charged language that is actually really, really appropriate at certain points when you're flirting with someone.
Yeah, and I kind of don't think there's any age where it doesn't matter to have some sexual flavor to your language.
No, so if you're not going to use the word hot, I'm trying to think of what other words there are. If you're not going to use the word hot, you need another word.
Ravishing.
Spicy.
Scrumtumptious.
Sultry.
Scrumtumptious.
Oh yeah. I don't know why I let that one slide.
That's what Willy Wonka might say if he was flirting.
This exchange reminds me of the text in the video we just did on texting this Sunday, where I gave a text that I've given many times in the past, but every time I give this text out, it's always divisive. There's always people who get it, and then there's the people who hate it, and they're like, I would never send that. And the text goes, I keep thinking about you and last night. It's annoying. And then you put a little smirking emoji. And every time I give this text, there is someone who says, I would never send that. That is like so rude to somebody. I wouldn't want to tell someone I like that they're annoying or it's annoying me. And it's always interesting to me because when someone says that, partly I'm like, that's an indication that you're not flirting enough, that this makes you feel uncomfortable because this is just a playful message.
Yeah.
What I also can read from that is that you may not be receiving it well when people are flirting with you. Because if someone said that to you, what you're really saying when you say, that's rude, I would never say that to someone, is you would find it rude if someone was playful for you with you in that way. So you're not just saying like, I'm not comfortable flirting in these slightly like boundary pushing ways that are a little bit edgy, but you're also telling me I won't receive it well if someone does this with me. And then I'm noticing, if someone flirts with you in these ways, you're going to neutralize it or take offense to it instead of running with the joke.
It's being in a very logical headspace, which is not helpful when you want to free flow and flirt.
Because you could say, instead, if you were in a playful state when you received that from someone, you could respond with, well, then you should know you've been annoying me all day.
Yes.
Right? That's flirting. But saying I would be offended by that or whatever, we get stuck in these patterns. Now, I'm not saying you're getting stuck, Janet. You may just not like the word hot from a man over 60, which is perfectly reasonable. But you've got to have a word for something that strays into the sexual, not just words that stay in that like classy, silver knives and forks realm.
Restrained Pride and Prejudice form of flirting.
Exactly. So we are today talking about why it is that we can go on a great date and then someone pulls away. So we have a poll that we put out to our audience on this, and the results are very interesting. But before we do, I want to say for the last 17 years of my life, you, Stephen, know this better than anybody, the questions that have come through, the volume of questions from people saying, I just don't know why I didn't get the call. I don't know why the date went well. And then all of a sudden nothing happened. And then people are playing detective on it, suggests that they are truly bewildered as to what's going on. Mm-hmm. But then we had a poll where we asked people themselves, like, why didn't you go on a second date? Maybe you're confused about why other people aren't going on a second date with you when it seems like you had a great time, but why aren't you going on a second date with other people? What were the results of that poll?
Well, overwhelmingly, the majority said it was because they didn't feel a spark at 56%. The second largest was compatibility issues such as job, lifestyle, etc. at 23%. We then had not over our ex at 12%, and the last one was at 9%, not ready to commit.
That is a huge result for didn't feel a spark. I thought compatibility would be higher. I thought a lot of people would just say, oh, I just didn't think we saw eye to eye on certain values, or they didn't have the same level of kindness I care about or ambition. But a lot of people just seem to be like, there's not enough attraction.
I think if you find someone attractive and sexy, you don't care about compatibility on the first date.
That is truth, Audrey. That is truth.
I think the compatibility
you
one, compatibility is more likely to come up as a reason why you didn't go on a second date if you're being highly intentional. I think for people who are being really intentional, they see certain things in a person or the way they speak, and they just go, oh, this probably isn't going to work. You travel all the time. I don't really love your values. Or those things are very apparent to people who are very tuned in to the kind of thing they're looking for and are being very intentional about having a relationship that's going to work. Most people are not being intentional, even when they say they are. To your point, Audrey, most people, it's enough that they just feel like they're having a great time. Someone is entertaining. They find them hot. That's enough to get them to the second date.
You don't want the same things as me. Challenge accepted.
Yes, it's more like compatibility will be the reason someone didn't commit or wasn't willing to take it further. So is that why people just flake then? Do you think people just flake because they just go, it wasn't enough. Like, I don't even want to kiss this person, or I don't want to sleep with them or something.
And do you think it's different for men and women?
I think that there's a lot of guys who will go on a second date to hook up. Not all, but a lot will go on a second date to hook up because they think someone is sexy. There's an attraction there, even if they look at someone and they're like, you're not for me. I don't think that this would work, or you're not someone I want to be in a relationship with. I think a lot of guys will go on that second date.
Those rascals.
As long as there's like no yikes moment. It's like if someone is sexy, fun, and no yikes moment. Like
what would be like a yikes moment?
I don't know,
like alarm bells, like this person's gonna
ruin my life.
Right.
Or there's something scary they said, something intense.
Got it.
Like this is going to go really badly.
Other than that, if there's no scary moment, they might hook up with someone.
Might hook up, yeah.
And therefore have another date.
Absolute pigs, all of you.
Why are you lumping us in?
Good point.
You're men, aren't you?
Rude.
Tell us about women. If they go on a date and they think someone is hot, but there's, no deeper compatibility, are they still going on another date with that guy?
I think you have to define compatibility. I think if you go on a date with someone and they're really handsome and attractive, but you don't have a lot of fun with them, for instance, because they're maybe not, I don't know, they're just not as fun as the kind of people you want to date. Or they're not as charismatic, or they're not as confident, or things like that. I think you then will go, that almost amounts to not having a spark, even though they can be really physically attractive. That happens a lot. I think that if you meet a guy and you feel so attracted to them, you think they're amazing, and then they're like, I'm not really sure I'm looking for a relationship. I think a lot of women will just go, well, I don't really meet people I like, so I'm just going to stick this out and see where it goes, because maybe they'll change their mind. And then I think there's the other side of it, which is if somebody's on a date and someone is clearly unkind or, shows themselves to have really, really different values from you, I think that can also become a turn off. If it's sort of to the extreme that you're like, oh, I just don't really like that kind of person. But I think if it's compatibility on those more superficial levels, women are more likely to be like, I'm massively kind of lumping all women in one, but I do think this is the pattern I've seen in my life, my friends' lives, and just observed through 35 years of existing. I think there's much more of a I will change him.
Why do we think there's such a huge gap between the simplicity in our own lives when we're asked, why didn't you go on a second date? And 56% said, I didn't feel a spark. And the complications that we attribute to when someone else doesn't want to go on a second date with us.
I think we have something where we don't think about the other person's perspective on what they want, and what is it, everything that's going on in their life. And some people will just be charming and nice on a first date. So you think that went well. They will flirt. Maybe they do think you're kind of cute or whatever. They flirt. Like, yeah, many of us will have done this. You'll be on a date and be charming and that, but you might be thinking, I'm not that into this, or maybe I'm not attracted enough, but I'm kind of being my charming self because I want to impress. And we have a natural instinct to want to impress on a date. People still want to win the other person's attention, even if they don't want to go further. And I think we just don't put ourselves in that perspective. So we can go home thinking, oh, that went really well. But you just don't know, A, where that person's head is at. Some people literally go on a date and get back with an ex like a week after. Some people go on a date just to test the water. Some people are looking for something really specific, and they might have kind of liked you, but they may have just got some sense that this wasn't the exact kind of person I was looking for. People have very specific tastes. So I think we just take this way, way too personally.
But you said something super, super interesting, I think, which is the experience that people have where they will have a great date, which is kind of the question of this episode, right? Like, why do you not hear from them after a great date? And I think that's the piece that's really difficult for people to wrap their heads around, because when you're asking people, why didn't you go on that second date? If they didn't feel a spark, it's very easy for them to identify that that's why, because they didn't feel like they had a great date. But it's difficult when your experience is that you're having a great date and the instinct isn't to think maybe they weren't having a great date either. Maybe they were just pretending to just go along with it and enjoying the evening and just making the best of it. Instead, we go, I should say, oh my God, it's because, I don't understand, because this was such a great connection that we
had
shared.
such an amazing connection.
Exactly. So I think it's really important what you said. And I think it really does come down to the experience that the other person gives you on a date as well.
Which is, yeah. And look, that just boils down to this truth that I think a lot of us do forget, that it's more fun to be on a date where someone really likes you. Yeah. It's more fun to be on a date where you're impressing someone. It's more fun to be on a date where you're having fun and having great conversation and it feels fun and flirty. And not everyone can, of course, there's a kind of person we can go on a date with where we feel absolutely nothing. And then it might be, for most people, it's really hard to conjure up a great date in that situation. But if you're feeling attracted enough, even though you're already thinking, I probably won't see this person again, a lot of people in those circumstances will just put on a great performance, because that's what's going to make the next 2 hours or the next hour the most fun. There's an egoic element of still wanting that person to think you're great. So that does result in a lot of confusion. And I suppose, what comfort can we offer people? Because that feels like a very disorienting realization that, so wait, now what? You're saying that great dates don't mean anything? What means anything? If I go on a bad date, it's bad. And if I go on a great date, it still doesn't mean anything. So how do I continue through this process enjoyably knowing that?
I think for me, it's take first dates a lot less seriously. Getting a first date is almost it's like hanging your coat at the door and taking a look around the house you're looking at. It's like you're just seeing, feeling out. Especially these days, first dates are often when people met for the first time. They didn't, they often met on an app and then went on a first date. So it's like the very first meeting you're having. And I think a little bit that people are projecting too much when they say that was such an amazing date. In a way, I'm way more interested how the second and third date is going, and what happens in between the first and second date. Because I know from experience, first dates can be so fickle. Sometimes they tip in your direction, the person's excited, sometimes they just don't, and it fizzles out, other things happen, people get busy. So I think you have to take a first date, bring down the temperature on what it means. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't know them that well. You don't know enough to say, we fit so well together, what happened? Maybe you don't. Maybe you do just have great conversation, but you get down to it and actually you'll find out you're both really different, or you have different values. And
when people say we fit so well together, there's always an enormous amount of projection in that. There's an enormous amount of sort of superficial connections that you're making in your mind. It's like someone can say that they're into these quirky movies that you're into, and all of a sudden your brain lights up and says, oh my God, no one's ever into those movies, and this person is into those movies, and I've never met someone who is into these things that I'm into, and that must mean something, but it might not mean anything.
yeah,
There's lots of people who like what you like who are the worst. Like it doesn't
No, it's really
necessarily
true.
mean
It's really
anything.
true.
And we because we're a biased judge, we want to find love. So we are so tuned in to anything that could feel like that. And then we come away with a whole bunch of evidence to say, see, look how connected we are. But there's no real depth to it at that stage, even if it turns into something of depth. Because I'm not just talking about times when it's wrong. I'm saying even when it's right, the depth isn't there in the same way on the first date as it will be on the 50th date or the 100th date. I'm curious for each of you if there's something that's safe for air that is a reason why you didn't go on a second date with somebody.
I think oversharing is a big one. I think people confuse connecting and oversharing all the time, and it's kind of like this sort of like intensity that people almost, it becomes this artificial sort of connection that tries to almost fast track and burn through all the stages. Because if you're on the first date or second date, you don't need to tell everybody your life story and like the deepest, darkest secrets, your insecurities, your this, stories about your exes. You also don't need to be trying to kind of dig and prod at them to try and find out those things about them. It's just not really an appropriate thing to do. I think you can go deep on subjects, but, you know, a lot of people kind of, they try to go very deep very quickly by oversharing and being very intense. And I think that can be quite a turn off. And in some cases, it even feels like a red flag, I think.
Is it a red flag because it says something, it's almost like manipulative vulnerability or manipulative oversharing?
No, I think it's just...
or not being too like spilling it all out there and not having anything that's sacred or private?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't want to make people feel bad who do this because I've done this in my life. So it's really it's not a criticism. It's just, I think oversharing comes from a place of not understanding that there's a big difference between kind of being vulnerable and allowing somebody to see the parts of you that are not the kind of polished, perfect parts of you, which actually is very attractive. It's almost like not having a boundary with yourself, if that makes sense. It's almost like, you know, when people say, I'm an open book, I tell everyone everything about myself. A lot of the time that comes from a people-pleasing tendency of almost being like, you know, almost like there's nothing hidden about me and I'm just this open book and I just share everything. And if you can't accept that, then you're not the right person for me. But actually, I think it comes from a place within ourselves of not having processed certain things, and we kind of lead with that.
And a kind of lack of discernment of who should I share this with?
Yeah, of course, exactly. And I think we lead with it in almost a kind of like, it becomes part of our identity a little bit.
That's what I was going to say. I also think it sometimes is a reflection of what we're spending all of our time thinking about.
Yes, that's so true.
In the same way that someone who works all day and night and never does anything else, a complete workaholic, it's like goes on a date and someone's like, so how are you doing? What have you been up to this week? And what's going, and they're like, meetings, you know, like they've got nothing to say outside of the work context.
I think I'm like that with my friends. I'm like, all I talk about is work.
Well, we're probably both a little bit like
But I wouldn't
that.
imagine you on a date would do that, Audrey. I think I have.
I agree.
I'm
You wouldn't do
great
that.
on
on
it.
a
I think
date.
I have dated people before, at least one or two people who puts a lot of identity in their work, maybe even ego. And there's like an ego battle of how busy I am and how dedicated I am. And some people it's like they over-index on ambition and success, and you're like, I'm kind of losing attraction because this is your only shtick.
And it's the same thing with someone who's done a ton of therapy. They can over-index on therapy talk because that's where they've spent so much time in the last year or 2 years. So they speak a language that other people don't necessarily speak because they're using therapeutic terms and are fluent in this language of healing and personal growth and trauma and all of these things. So they sort of use language that other people don't connect with or relate to. It's like we have to be cognizant of the fact that just because somebody hasn't lived the same life as us or doesn't have all of the same interests or hasn't read the same books, or that doesn't mean that they're not valuable to us as a partner. It doesn't mean they don't have our world isn't going to be expanded by that person being in our lives. But we go in with the language that we're really familiar with. And then, someone who's talked about their trauma in therapy for the last year, all of a sudden shows up on a date and starts talking about that. Like it's normal to just go and share all of these things about yourself that quickly. And that person hasn't earned the right to be in that space yet.
So it's intense.
It's very intense. And I think sometimes it's just a reflection of like, this is what I've been spending all of my time thinking about, which is we're not broadening ourselves out past those.
Intensity is scary in general.
I think there's a really interesting point in all of this, which is you never know what behaviors are turning people off. You never know kind of what opportunities you're losing through certain behaviors that you're displaying. Because, for instance, if you are somebody who's like that and is intense, to your point, Stephen, like that's scary. But if you meet another intense person, you might get on really well. But then what you're looking for is somebody who isn't necessarily intense, who is kind of more level-headed, and you're actually looking for that to complement you because you know that potentially you struggle with certain things and you need someone who can kind of bring you down to a more neutral level. You might turn that person off by being really intense and actually attract the intense people you're trying to repel. So I think you have to be really careful with just what your behavior is attracting and repelling unconsciously.
Yeah.
Do you have any weird things or unique things that have made you not go on another date with someone?
Yeah, what's your story, Audrey?
Mine? I was trying to think about this. Mine are really embarrassing and nothing to do with the other person, everything to do with me. I once dated somebody for like 2 or 3 dates, and he was like perfect on paper is how you would describe him. He was actually a really lovely, great person. But I was going through a phase in my life where I was just kind of looking for more like bad boys, like just kind of like, I don't know, edgy guys a little bit. And I remember like almost just getting the ick because of like how nice and normal and great he was. And he was he was like a real grown up, in his like mid-20s. And I was like, that's really unattractive that he's like such a grown up. I don't want that. It's very embarrassing to admit that.
You wanted a sexy, starving artist today.
I was just attracted to the wrong things.
But it's that's interesting because I almost want to add on your behalf there that, because that what you just said lends a lot of credence to the whole, like women just don't care about when guys are actually good guys, and they just go after guys who are not great and who behave badly and treat them badly and whatever. But it's something that you like, that was a phase for you.
Well, no, this is what I was going to say. At that phase, I was probably oversharing on dates, probably being intense. I hadn't really worked out. I was fairly, my 20s were quite a turbulent time, and I was fairly kind of like in free fall for a lot of my mid-20s and early 20s. And I think what I was attracted to was just a reflection of how I was feeling about myself. And yeah, it's absolutely the case that I ended up fairly quickly, actually. I'd say, like, it didn't take me a decade to work this out, but I was like, oh, this is not where my happiness is at. And I need to, as I started to fix and work through and kind of really attend to all of the things that were going on within myself, I started to get very turned off by the very things I used to, be attracted to.
It's almost off center to what we're talking about today, but I think it's just worth drawing attention to, because there will be plenty of guys. Like, I think what we're seeing out there a lot right now is guys who feel very embittered by the fact that, women don't seem to want an actual good guy. They seem to sort of overlook those guys and go straight for guys who act more primitive and treat them worse. And that's the kind of, that's the frustration for so many men. It's like, when I'm a good guy, I get overlooked. But the reason I want to pick up on that for you is that was also a reflection of a time in your life where you, like, I mean this with love, but you were a lot less of a catch then than you are today.
Rude.
Because, in the same way that I 5-10 years ago was a lot less of a catch than I am today. And the reason is because that was coming from a wound in you. It was coming from a place of emotional immaturity. And I think it's important for guys to hear that, because I think the reason so many guys right now are unhappy or feeling really resentful is that they stay focused on that version of that woman. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's no secret that many women never grow out of that. And then the guys who feel like that's what women are like feel very validated by the fact that that's what women are like. But the truth is, there are absolutely women who grow out of that, and that makes them better catches at the time that they've grown out of that. I kind of highlight this because I want to draw more attention for guys, especially listening to this podcast. I want to draw more attention to the fact that your focus should be on the kinds of women who have actually evolved to a point where they no longer feel that that's the mark of an attractive man that they're looking for. That's no longer the mark of a man's value.
Yeah.
I also think you reject more people for superficial reasons when you haven't accepted yourself. And I think for all you could be just too well-rounded, too available emotionally, too straightforward and too kind. And that's just a turn off to that person. But you shouldn't not be those things just because that person's not ready to receive those qualities.
No, and what I like is that it demonstrates that emotional unavailability exists on the female side as well as it on the male side.
Yeah,
men get a really bad rap for being emotionally unavailable, but the kind of woman you're talking about in a way that is unique to a lot of women is emotionally unavailable herself in a certain way.
What's yours? What's your date story?
I was in my 20s, like probably mid 20s, and at the time, I didn't go on a date with someone again, partly because on the date, she was talking about her pet rats. And I was...
Rats are so cute.
Well, this is the thing. I mentioned this to David earlier, and David was, you were appalled, weren't you?
Yeah,
I agree.
was. I still am.
In my defense,
there is no defense.
I hadn't seen the video you showed me today of the cutest rat I've ever seen eating spaghetti.
We don't normally do this on the podcast, but because I'm a little more behind the scenes, let's put that little rat right here.
It's really, really adorable. And I have to say, I feel changed.
So in this moment with this woman, though...
This is like the same revelation of change that Audrey had, discovering that consistency of communication is now important to her, as you're having now in discovering rats are
Adorable.
or adorable.
Yeah, I would put those two things on par.
So when you heard she had a rat, is it a pet thing?
Rats.
Is it she's too attached to the rats?
Plural.
It's okay. Or is it just you don't like rats? Did it say something about the person to you?
Okay, let me go on the journey here of what, like at the time, if you'd have asked me, I would have said, I'm not, like I didn't want someone who had a pet anyway, because it just felt like a lot to be with someone who had a pet, and then there's, whatever. It just felt like another thing. We're already learning about my issues at the time, and how like I just didn't want anything that could be like more stress, more of a headache, more of a this.
I think you envisioned, and I think this happens sometimes when you realize you're not compatible with someone. They say one thing and you envisioned the next 20 years with the rat person.
Walking the rats.
And you thought there's going to be other exotic pets. There's going to be a lot of time spent, if she's already got the rats, what's next? I think you envisioned a whole life that you just thought that's not for me.
Mate, that's possibly true. Like I said, at the time it was very literal to me. I just walked away and I went, I don't think that this will go any further. And I attached that to sort of the idea of, well, I don't know if the person who's got, like rats in their room at home is for me. But now I look back on it, and by the way, I was wrong. It's not, she wasn't wrong. Like, I was the one who was wrong because she was just doing her. And as like I said, David, I'm a changed man. They're adorable. That was just something that meant something to her. And she was talking about something that meant something to her. I was the judgmental asshole on the date who had decided like, this is a reason why this person isn't for me. But when I look back now, I can see the way I did that on 50 different dates. And my point is we say no for all sorts of stupid reasons. And those stupid reasons are generally a reflection of some kind of either a standard or a very specific idea we've created in our head, which, by the way, is specific in ways we don't even know. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't have anticipated that like that would be the thing that would be a reason to say no. I didn't, in my specific version of someone I was choosing, I didn't say someone who doesn't have rats, but that came along and it was like, that doesn't fit with my like vision of who I think I'm going to be with, or the person for me, or whatever. And we do that in 1,000 different ways. And I've for sure become a person who I'm so much more open today than I have ever been. And I think of like all of the ways that we get hurt in our lives by someone not wanting to see us again. And sometimes it would feel like the feedback would be helpful. And maybe in some cases that's true. The feedback would be helpful. Like if we have a body odor problem that is fixable, it would probably be helpful at some point in our lives if someone pulled us aside and said, hey, I say this with love as someone who cares about you. I think that this is affecting you in your life. I think it's affecting your opportunities. I think it's affecting you in love. That would be a thing that would actually be helpful. But if everyone was honest with us all the time about why they didn't go on another date with us, we'd get an enormous amount of feedback that was not useful. Like if I had been the guy who gave that feedback the day after the date and said it was because you talked about the rats. And she then went away and said, I shouldn't own rats.
You're the problem, not her.
I was the problem. That's my whole point.
But
she shouldn't, that would be feedback that wouldn't be helpful to her. And it would actually be very sad and dangerous if she took that on as like something she needed to change.
I would argue, tell me if you don't agree, you have got so much more accepting of other people since you have learned to accept yourself more.
I think that's true, Matt.
But I think it's true in everybody. Like that was the pattern I went through. And I'm only saying that because I I actually saw you go on that same journey with my own eyes, but I think that that judgment of other people and the expectation of pressure, we say like this person needs to be like that, they need to have this and whatever. It usually is because we are so unkind and unaccepting of ourselves that we expect other people to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, we're revolted. But that's because we just haven't accepted ourselves. And the more you accept yourself, the more you actually end up opening up your pool of people to choose from, because you start to see all the awesome ways in which people, all the ways in which people are awesome. Like the rat queen is awesome, and you couldn't see that at the time because you were too judgmental about her, because you were too judgmental about you.
It's no different from high school, when you suspect that you might not be cool or as cool as you would like to be. And when that's the case, you have one of two ways you can go. You can either embrace that the way you are and lean into it and be with all of the interesting people around you who don't fit into some stereotype of cool, and make that your community and accept yourself. Or you can do what so many people do, which is hate yourself for what you perceive to be your lack of coolness, and try to align yourself with as many cool people as possible so that you can try and disguise yourself among the cool people and feel like you're one of them. And then not be around these people over here who you suspect are a little too much like you, and go, I don't want to be around them. That's going to infect me with more of what I don't want in myself.
I'm going to get found out.
This is going to be like, so I think that we carry that over into dating so much. We have contempt for people who in some way remind us of the parts of ourselves we don't like or wish or want to hide or are trying to get away from.
Yeah, the people in life who are most judgmental of other people's failures can't stand failure themselves. Like, they're the first ones to point at other people and mock them if they fail. They have usually a very bad relationship with failing.
So there you have it. That is why they didn't call for a second date, is because they suck, not because of you.
Well, if you have a story about a situation where you look back on a date and you think, God, I was so silly for rejecting that person on those grounds, or maybe you have your own version of the stories we've told, we'd love to hear them. podcast@matthewhussey.com. How have you changed in your assessment of people? And do you have a story of being on the other side of it, where a first date went well and you didn't hear from someone? And has there been any kind of closure or feeling you've got from this particular episode that you want to share with us? We would love to read them. Again, that email address is podcast@matthewhussey.com. We'll be reading a couple in the next episode. By the way, Audrey, there was someone, Sophie, who wrote under the episode about how to overcome your biggest dating insecurities. That was episode 289 for people who want to go and listen to it. She said, I loved this episode and particularly wanted to say thank you to Audrey for speaking about her hair loss experience. It's something I'm currently dealing with, and it has triggered a lot of fear around being desirable enough or even being able to date at all. I feel a lot less alone from hearing your perspective.
Sophie, thank you so much for writing in, and I'm really, really glad that it resonated with you. It's really, really difficult. There are very few things as difficult and anxiety-inducing as losing your hair. And so I really understand, and I'm really glad that it made you feel less alone.
Lovely. Thank you, Sophie.
Next up, we have Love Life Line, where one of our Love Life members sent in a voice note. This one is from the lovely Paula. Producer David?
I met with a guy on Thursday. We've been texting quite short on a dating app, and I actually liked the fact that he asked very early on. And it went well, and I was away on the weekend, and I was flirtatiously, very naturally prompting a second date. And despite the fact that he's quite busy with his work, he was watching Black Mirror the whole Saturday afternoon, and he still hasn't suggested anything. So yesterday I said, well, I am leaving in a couple of days, so if you want to grab that ramen that we've been talking about, I would love to. And he said that he actually is leaving even earlier. But if I'm free tomorrow, he's up for it. And I said, well, I have plans already because it was late evening. So my interest is dropping. Any advice?
Well, firstly, Paula, I was going to say to you, I think the fact that you reached out and said, you know, I'm leaving in a couple of days, so if you want to go and get that ramen, I'd love to. I think that's really lovely and vulnerable, and it's not I like the fact that you weren't playing any sort of a game with that.
Yeah, I like that text.
A lot of people are like, oh, I've already said I wanted to hang out. He sat at home watching Black Mirror all of Saturday, even though, you know, he talks about how busy he is with his work and how he has no time. You know, I would have thought if he had any time, he would have wanted to see me. But you didn't let your ego get in the way of you saying, I'm not around in a couple of days, so I'd love to do that. I think that was a really, really good move. It sounds positive that he then said, I'm leaving sooner than I thought, but Sunday could work. Like, why don't we do it tomorrow? And you're saying, I can't do tomorrow because, you know, you have plans. I don't know that should make you lose interest, because at this point, it just feels like you guys are struggling to make a plan. What I might say is, I'm already committed to seeing friends tomorrow. Here are the times I can do before I leave. If any of them work for you, let me know. Otherwise, we can always try and, you know, do something when you're back or when I'm back. But I don't think that you should. This almost goes back, Stephen, to your point about not putting too much emphasis on the first date. Because if you get very deflated if you've put an enormous amount of emphasis on the first date. And I get that, like, if it's all too complicated and you keep trying and like nothing's happening, then that is frustrating. But it's only frustrating as much as you have already put an enormous amount of stock in that person. If instead you say, okay, let's just look at the facts. I have been on a good date with someone. It went well enough that I want to see them again. They seem to want to see me again. We were trying to see each other over the 4-day period that we're both available, and we're both struggling to do that. I've offered a time, he can't do it. He's offered a time, I can't do it. I'm going to have one more shot at it. I'm going to say, okay, I can't do tomorrow. Listen, here's what I could do. I could come meet you afterwards, after I've seen my friends, or we could do something on Monday night. Outside of that, I'm not available. Let me know if either of those work for you. Otherwise, we can try and do something when we're both back. What you then have to do is not sit around hoping and waiting for that possible date in the future if nothing happens. What you then do is you go out and you continue with your life, including your love life. You keep moving forward, because when we get too focused on someone too quickly, then everything has to be kind of binary, if you know what I mean. It's like we have to be all in or I'm out, because we feel the stakes are high and we don't want to get hurt. So we're like, so that makes us say something like, I'm losing interest after only a few days. And that might be premature right now, given that you don't really know each other. You don't owe each other anything. You both seem to be busy people. You're both, I don't know for what reason, but you're both not around in the next few days. So you're just two people who struggled to get together again, right? I don't know what that means. It might mean he's not as interested as you are. I don't know. Or it might just mean
he really loves Black Mirror.
He really loves Black Mirror, as do me and Audrey.
It's a good series.
But, you know, I don't know what it means. What I know is that when we get too invested, it actually puts us into a more extreme mindset where I have to know whether this person is serious or not right now. If they are, great, I'm all in. And if they're not, I'm losing interest and I'm out. Instead of going, let me just continue with my life. Let me continue to go on dates. And if a week from now, this person's back in town and they say, I'd really love to see you, go see them. If you went on a date in the meantime, no problem. Maybe you had a great date in the meantime, but you also don't know that person anything right now either. So you go on a great date and then this person comes back and calls you and says, do you want to do something? And you say, sure. You're able to be more light on your feet because you're not having to make big decisions after one date about what this thing is. And the only time you feel like you have to make a big decision is if you are now deciding to cut off all your other options. And we've talked about this in other episodes, that you don't need to cut off all your other options at a point where no one's asking you to, and it certainly doesn't warrant it. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Paula, and thank you so much for being a Love Life member. We so appreciate it. We look forward to all of the upcoming coaching sessions we're going to do together. Remember, for anyone else who hasn't joined Love Life yet, you can join at joinlovelife.com. All right. I think it's that time again. David,
take us away.
Oh, yeah. Steve's sleeves.
That's magical. Well, everyone. We're going to play Ick Detectives. So I want to talk about some icks. And let me preface this. A lot of the icks concept we know is stupid. A lot of it is just, some of it's mean-spirited.
And the ick, just to define it for anyone who doesn't know, the ick is like something that happens early on that just, or maybe not early on, but it happens at some point that just completely turns you off to the point of no return.
And some of it, I'm clear, at some point in the beginning of the ick phenomena, it was describing something genuine. It obviously, some of it just became mean-spirited. Some of it became people just saying their minute peccadillos. And some of it just became like this, you know, I'm going to make up the most ridiculous thing ever and call that an ick. So let's preface this by saying we're not taking icks that seriously, but herein lies the feature. I'm going to read a few icks and I want you to tell me if it is just some dumb preference someone has or if there's anything to it that is going on under the hood that you can say, actually, this ick does point to something.
Isn't there a kids show called like in England called Ickle Pickle?
There is. Iggle Piggle.
Iggle Piggle. So can we change it to Ickle Pickle and say ickle or pickle?
Absolutely no way.
I love that.
So ickle is the bad one. Pickle is like we think, no, that's absolutely not an ick. That's a good thing.
I agree. Let's do that.
So, someone asking for a knife and fork in a Japanese restaurant.
Oh.
That one seems...
Pickle.
I get it, but it seems a bit snooty.
Yeah, pickle.
Because sometimes you do just want to grab the rice.
Some people don't know how to use chopstick.
Yeah.
Okay, pickle.
What did your heart think?
Here's one. When they print out their airline tickets instead of showing them on their phone.
No, pickle.
Pickle.
Straight pickle.
That's fine.
That's nice and organized. I like that.
There's nothing wrong with paper.
Does it show, though, a lack of... I mean, it's obviously more convenient and clearer just to get it on your phone these days. Everyone has Wi-Fi.
I think what people find... I reckon why people think that's an ick is not because of that, though. I think it's because it's the kind of forward planning and organization that's like trying too hard and like caring too much.
Really?
I still think it's pickle.
This is an interesting one. The single sad pillow on a double bed. So a guy with like a single flat pillow on a double bed.
This is the opposite end of the spectrum to the woman who has 1,000 small pillows on a bed.
Which is quite annoying.
Which
when
is
you just
really
all you
annoying.
do is chuck them off.
Really
like,
annoying.
chuck pillows off all the time.
But this is like the male version of that.
So what do you think of that?
I think Audrey's got to answer that one.
She thinks that's a major ick. And she's going to tell us why.
No, I don't think it's a major hick.
No, we're calling them ickles because an ickle is not quite... I'm going to say an ickle is not quite an ick. It's just ick adjacent.
I think
that way we can get away with it.
I think the flat pillow is showing to a woman, it's like he's not conscientious. Like he doesn't have standards for comfort. It's like a man, she might go to a man's and he only has like one towel. And she's like, no, you should have like 3 or 4 towels.
Do you have more than one towel though?
Absolutely. I have several. probably like 5 or 6.
That's honestly, I'm impressed and surprised.
Your image of me is very offensive sometimes.
Well, you never invite me over. When was the last time you
Well,
invited
you
me
use all
over?
the towels.
You used the towel.
No, Audrey, do you agree with me? I think the flat pillow is something about a man not being conscientious enough about comfort. Like it's too utilitarian.
I reckon what the reason people find it an ick is because it shows that they're kind of like single and
It's bachelory.
a bit, bachelory.
It's worse
and
than
like,
bachelory if she, like, what, he's invited her over and he's not made sure that there's now another pillow, even if he's happy to live in that way.
Yeah.
Ickle.
Maybe he
Okay.
gives her the pillow and he sleeps without a pillow.
Pickle.
Okay, one that comes up really commonly is men talking in a baby voice.
I sort of,
Well, define baby voice.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different cutesy voices that you use in the context of a relationship. But I wouldn't define all of them as baby voices. I think if I'm thinking of the stereotypical like baby voice, ickle. All the way.
But there can be cute voices.
There could be cute
Because couples have
voices.
little cute voices
Yeah,
they
exactly.
can do.
You do weird shit together.
Walking around in just their top, if it's a guy.
We had, oh my God, we had this conversation.
we did 2
We
days
literally
ago.
had this conversation 2 days ago. I walked into the bathroom. I was wearing a t-shirt and nothing else.
And your little socks.
No, not even. Audrey laughed.
Audrey.
And I wait, and I laughed with her because I got it.
Did
I
you
was
walk
like,
in all dainty like you were like in a sort of French advert, like with your little top pulled
No,
over?
I just instantly realized I got it. I agreed. And I was like, yes, a woman walking around in nothing but a t-shirt is sexy. A man walking around in nothing but a t-shirt is funny. You can't say ick though. You could just say hilarious. Funny.
Hilarious. Funny. All right. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, guys.
Oh man, that was a good one. I enjoyed that very much. Jackie Henry, by the way, did write to us to say that pickles is growing on her. So just putting that out there. I like the fact that she's like slowly been worn down. Because you've used it so much, Stephen, that you're actually starting to grind people into submission, much in the same way we did with you and Steve's sleeves.
Yeah. Well, it's how it happens. Great art is ahead of its time.
Leave us a review if you would on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot to us. It helps spread the word. We've got, it's a new format. We're all putting love into this. We're putting our heart and soul into bringing you episodes that are not just didactic in nature, but are entertaining and, just give you more of us. Because, YouTube is like one version of me to camera, and I try to be as helpful and as value driven as possible. On the podcast, we get to make it more of a show and hang out with you guys. And we have Harrison here and we have producer David, and everyone puts a lot of work into this. So it would just mean a lot to us for you to leave a review on Apple. And don't forget to try Matthew AI for free. If you have any questions from this episode, something that is brought up for you, something you would love to ask us here on the show, but you don't want to wait until next time, go to askmh, that's askmh.com, and you can ask a question for free of Matthew AI right now. And of course, if you love it, you can get it unlimited and become a member and all of that good stuff. But go try it. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We so appreciate you. If you watch this on YouTube, thank you for watching it, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.